This is Mason Dove. I'm going to be talking about my midterm essay for American government. So first of all, my title is Double-Edged Sword, Navigating Contradictory Bias in American News Media. My introductory includes my hook, where I talk about what media does to the public. After that, I talk about what media bias actually is, where you can find it, the different types of media bias. I specifically mentioned spin bias and slant bias. After that, I explain what spin bias is and also what slant bias is specifically. And then I dive into my topic of should vaccinations be mandatory for different jobs, different states. So for my first paragraph, I talk about an article that Holly Elliott wrote in September of 2021, which is named "Employment: More Workers Are Facing Mandatory COVID Vaccination or No Job," where she mentions lots of quotes from people like Dan Price. She talks about a lot of percentages in different job sectors and how those mandates have increased. And after all that, I go into what the biases that I saw in that, which it was mostly slant bias, but there was one part of spin bias where she does use the word obvious in one of her key points at the beginning of her essay, where she says there are a growing number of jobs and sectors which are now requiring people to be fully vaccinated against COVID-19, and not only in the more obvious public-facing roles. Now, using the word obvious is very opinionated, and it's making the situation seem a lot more of a no-brainer than it actually is. And I also go into the spin bias that she had, where she only talks about the job sectors that have increased their mandates instead of and she doesn't even mention the ones that haven't, like manual labor jobs and construction. And then my next body paragraph, I talk about the next article, which is States Are Abandoning COVID-19 Vaccination Requirements, which was written by Elliot Davis Jr. in April of 2021. He talks about a lot of states that have had the bans on the requirements of vaccinations in those different states. He mentions a lot of what different governors have said, like Asa Hutchinson and Henry McMaster. He also mentions a lot of the vaccination passport, and how he's seen 32 bills go across over 25 states. And then after that, he ends the article with basically an overall percentage of the U.S. is fully vaccinated or slightly vaccinated. And basically, after that, I talk about the bias that I found in his article, which is only slant bias is what I found. And basically what this means is he's only mentioning the states that do have the ban on the requirement, but he's not mentioning the states that don't have the ban on the requirement. So he's only mentioning one side of the story, which is highlighting a textbook example of slant bias. Afterwards, I'll start talking about percentages of the approval rates of the population, where I talk about statistics from a 50-year span of 1972 to 2022. And I also talk about how this is affecting the approval rates of the different political parties, Democratic, Republican, Independent, which the approval rates for all three of those have gone down. Then after that, I have my conclusion. It's a short conclusion, so I'm just going to read it. So I end my essay with, in conclusion, my research does in fact show that media bias is in fact alive in the main media outlets in the U.S. I have learned that it is not hard to change this narrative, though. Through simple tweaks in popular news articles and programs, we can ensure that bias can disappear, and the actual truthful, nonpartisan, and helpful news stories will stand out and inform the U.S. population with more reliable news. And then to completely end my essay, I have my works cited, where I have the Gallup poll with the news, and then after that I have Davis Elliott and Holly Elliott. So that's the end of my essay. Thank you.